So we're here, Rosh Chodesh Tammuz today. A good Chodesh to everyone. It's a few days before Gimel Tammuz, the 32nd yahrzeit of the Rebbe. So it's always good to reflect a little beforehand so that we prepare ourselves. Bichlal, a yahrzeit of a tzaddik, is a monumental day and a monumental opportunity. The truth is that for every Yid, every person on their yahrzeit, they have an aliyah. That's basic Jewish belief and tradition. But according to the Zohar and other sources, the yahrzeit of a tzaddik is even twofold, because a tzaddik, as the Alter Rebbe says in Igeres HaKodesh Siman Chof Zayin, letter 27, Alter Rebbe explains that since the life of a tzaddik is Emunah, Yireh and Ava, faith, awe, and love for Hashem, therefore everything that we know about a yahrzeit, which is the ascension, the aliyah, is even greater. Because a regular basar adam, a regular person of flesh and blood, is bogged down by the gashmis, by the material. So therefore, the aliyah, the ascension, requires schlepping the person out of the gashmis to a higher level in ruchnius. But if to begin with you're not into gashmis, your whole life was about emunah, yireh, and ava, so the ascension, the aliyah, each year on the yahrzeit has already a good beginning, a good start. So it's easier in a sense to accomplish the aliyah. That's one thought that we walk away with when we learn the Tanya, the Igeres HaKodesh Chof Zayin, which is worth learning on every yahrzeit of a tzaddik, regardless of what tzaddik, or for that matter, even every person. Anyway, in the Rebbe's case, the Rebbe was a person who dedicated himself to Klal Yisrael to the point where he wasn't insular, and he wasn't even kind of selfish to his own Chabad needs and Chabad roots, but rather he opened the door for everyone. And I'll give you a few examples. I want to focus on this year. There were individuals over the 200 years of Chabad history that for whatever reason, and we've spoken about it over the years, for whatever reason, they didn't follow and go along with that particular Lubavitcher Rebbe, but they maybe went to another Chabad Rebbe, as we discussed, the Hasidus coming out of Baltimore, from the Sharviks, which is of the Kapust house of Chabad. And then earlier than that, there was the Strasheller, the prodigy student of the Balatanya, was Rabbaran Alevi Horowitz, who later became a Rebbe in the city of Strasheller, a.k.a. Rabbaran Strasheller, and he departed from not the Alter Rebbe, but the Alter Rebbe's son, the Mittler Rebbe. So that was another piece of history. And then in general, there were issues that Koil Chabad, the funding of Koil Chabad, both during the time of the Balatanya and then throughout each of the Lubavitcher Rebbe's lifetime, once Rebbe Avram Kalisker and the Lechovitcher, they created their own fund of Rameir Balanes, and the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe created the what's called Koil Chabad Fund. So over the years there were disputes, and it's not that it's terrible. It's just that people have different ways of seeing things. So if you ask a very passionate, as we say in Yiddish, a koch lefel. A koch lefel is, in English, the translation is very poor. A lefel is a spoon. Koch means to cook. It basically means someone who is, how should I say this, who's so passionate and a kanoi, a zealot, a passionate zealot. Maybe that would be a good translation of the Yiddish words koch level. So someone who's of that nature is definitely going to be very upset about the other strands that there aren't any longer, but there were in Chabad and other things, and studying the history and writing the history of a lot of these things in my books. So I understand both sides, and both sides are passionate about their belief. And at times it ended in, in bad fights and disagreements and in things that are not healthy. But the Rebbe, this is what I want to get to. Our Rebbe, his attitude was that post-Holocaust, we need to forget about all the issues of the past. Meaning to say, all the machlokes, and I'm from this lineage, and you're from this Hasidus, all those type of things we have to put aside, because the free world, whether it be America, Canada, Australia, England, Eretz Yisrael, the world post-Holocaust is a different world, really. If you read his letters, where he touches upon the Holocaust and the explanation of Holocaust, things of that, you come away with that understanding. And just for the record, Rabbi Soloveitchik changed his allegiance from Agudas Yisrael to Mizrahi because of the Holocaust. He said it and he wrote it. And that's when, the Haredi world, the Rosh Hashivas, they basically, ostracized him in a sense because, he was an Agudist. And his father was an Agudist. And Reb Chaim Brisker and the Rebbe Rashab are so anti-Zionists. And here he identifies with Mizrahi, which is very much a Zionist organization. Mizrahi, Orthodox Mizrahi, Zionism, but nevertheless, Rav Kook, etc. So what I'm saying is that just like the Rebbe Soloveitchik as well saw the Holocaust as a tipping point, that the issues of the past are finished. The era is closed, and you could know what happened, and it's good to know and have history and all that, but as far as practicality, we need to look differently at the whole situation. Simultaneously, the Rebbe kept his kind of old shtetl mentality and religiosity. And that's a very interesting phenomenon, a very unique one. And I'll tell you what Rabbi, what Rabbi Rakefet of the Grus Kollel in Yerushalayim told me, what Rabbi Soloveitchik told him in 1967 when a group of elder Chabad Hasidim came to be Menachem Ovel to comfort the Rav after he lost one of either his wife or his brother. I forget which one. I think it was his wife. And Rabbi Rakefet was in the house when these Lubavitcher elders were there. And then when they left, he said the following to Rakefet, and he repeated it to me. And I wrote it up in my book. He said, Rabbi Soloveitchik said about himself, he said it in Yiddish, I believe, when I was in college, when I was in Berlin, I was a student. And he, referring to the Rebbe, when he was in Berlin, he was a Yid, or a Yerushalayim. And he didn't say more, real Talmid Chachamim speak in brevity. They don't elaborate when it comes to mundane conversation. It doesn't mean to say that Rabbi Soloveitchik wasn't religious, Chas v'sholem, that's not what it means. But, a student doesn't necessarily cover his head with a yarmulke or a hat, which he didn't, as far as we know. The Rebbe never uncovered his head in university, as far as we know. And I think I told you once that he had a woman make him a toupee, which is a double covering. because in the Sorbonne, I believe, he wasn't, and maybe at the University of Berlin too, he wasn't allowed to have any covering. But so he had a toupee made on top of his hair, which was a double covering. This is a story from the inside that I heard from the son of Reb Chaim Yaakov Shilama, who I believe he lives in Eretz Yisrael, and it was his mother's good friend who told her this, and she told her husband told him, and he told me this. So that would be an example that I am a student and he's a Yerushalayim in university. And other such things. Rabbi Soloveitchik didn't have a beard. The Rebbe always had a beard. His beard was rolled up at a time, but he didn't touch his beard at all. So I bring out that the Rebbe, even in the height of intellectualism, university, and everything else, he kept the standards. Another thing that Rabbi Soloveitchik said, he invited the Rebbe, he said, let's have coffee or tea or water. Let's sit at a cafe and just, schmooze. Remember, there weren't many Yidden that were Orthodox at the University of Berlin, and especially not people that were so bright and genius-like. So several that there were like a chug, a group. The Rebbe, Rabbi Soloveitchik, and several others. Anyway, so he realized some of the days, or the days when he invited the Rebbe to sit with him and have a coffee or so, the Rebbe said he couldn't. And he put it together later because he saw a pattern. It was on a Monday and Thursday because the Rebbe would fast on Monday and Thursdays because of Bahab. And he didn't. Now, could be he didn't because it's not the brisk tradition, but just saying that, you're a student, university, you let your you chill. Again, I'm not talking about Chas v'Sholem, eating not kosher, not keeping Shabbos. I'm not talking about, but just, whatever else that means. I think you're all university people, you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so together with the Rebbe's, religiosity, comes to America in 1941. This Shabbos was 85 years since he landed on the shores of America in June of 41. And he's here till his passing in 1994, until he gets ill with his stroke in 1992. And he calls for a printing, for example, of this Rabban Strashela's Chassidus. In 1960, he spoke about that. And he said at the same time, I'm sure the elder Hasidim will be very upset with me, but too bad. It's time to forget all the grievances of the past and to go on. And this is good Chassidus, and Rabban Strashela was a tzaddik, and it's worthwhile learning this Chassidus. So what do you see, Chaim Zev? That there's a time in life where, we need to change and just let go and not, harbor on past grievances and issues. I would say that, the October 7th should be like the same type of wake-up call for Klal Yisrael in many ways, especially for everyone in Eretz Yisrael, but really for all of us. So that's one point I wanted to talk about and share, and how we have relatives, children, siblings, and sometimes we have issues, grievances with those that are close to us in life, Before I'm talking about, people that are 150 years removed from us. What about your parents, your siblings, your children, grandchildren, where there might be, grievances, and the grievances are such that they can, stop people from coming to simchas of each other, and God forbid, levayas, funerals, shiva, we're going to sit separately. I don't have to, specify. I think everyone knows what I'm talking about. And there's a time when, it was what it was, but now we have to continue in a different vein and really try forgetting, and surely, if not completely forgetting, allowing the grudges and the ill feelings that we have to to go away. Very, very important. Because like Dr. Abraham Avram Twersky, who is a shtickle, he was Rabbi Myers of Ramat Bet Shemesh's stepfather-in-law. He writes in one of his early books, and when I read it, I loved it, and I still remember it. He says, when you are angry on someone else who did some grievance to you and did something wrong, you're basically allowing someone to live rent-free in your house. Right? That person's issues you allow to eat you up. And the Rebbe, what I saw with the Rebbe, and we're talking here about Gimel Tammuz, guys, we're Farbrengen today instead of learning the Derech B'Tsecha. What I saw with the Rebbe is how he mamish let go. I'll give you another example. I just read this yesterday. Someone sent me a note. In 1988, a friend of mine was tragically killed in a car accident in New Jersey. He was a shliach, and his wife was about to have a baby, and it was a very, very tragic thing. The grandfather of the wife, who was close to the Rebbe, had written numerous times to the Rebbe asking that he bless the couple to have a child. I don't know, if there were complications, and I don't know the history of that, and after his wife's husband was killed, so he wrote to the Rebbe that maybe, I want you to hear this, Isser, don't sleep now. I want you to hear this, Rebbe, Isser, wake up. Anyway, he wrote to the Rebbe, Yoini, and he said, maybe this happened because I nudged the Rebbe, in a sense, nudging God, so much, pushing the envelope that my granddaughter should have a baby. Chaim Zed, you hear that? And so he was afraid of what's called a kpeda, that Hashem is being makpid, is being particular with him and his family, and it resulted in the death of her husband. This is what he wrote. I mean, he was that type of a, Moshe Myers, he was that type of a person, and it was a real chassid, and he did a tremendous amount for the Rebbe and Chabad, but he was more of that, you could say maybe he had an element of morbidity in his personality, and when something like this happens right away, he's trying to find something wrong with what he did to justify, to understand why God did this. And the Rebbe answered him and basically said, this is ridiculous, stop thinking this way, and don't kind of mix into God's thoughts. You don't know what you're talking about, and your thinking is erroneous. And I'm reading this, after all, what did he do that's so outrageous, right? The Gemara says when a person has a headache, they should check their deeds. Yefafshesh b'maiso. A headache. A mere little stinking headache. And if he or someone lost a son-in-law, a husband, this son-in-law, in a car accident, and his wife had a baby 2 days later, doesn't he have a right to look at himself and say, maybe I'm the cause? Says the Rebbe, no, you don't have a right. You have a right to do whatever you want, but it's negative. Stop this type of thinking. It's negative. And I had this with Rabbi Yoel Khan, my mashpia. There was a certain issue. I don't want to go into it. And I wasn't feeling well, and I felt maybe it's because I did something that Rabbi Yoel wasn't happy with. So I called him and I said, I want to ask forgiveness, because I don't want you to have a kpeda. I don't want you to be particular. And he basically pretty much hung up the phone. He said, stop with your nonsense, and he hung up the phone. So I learned from him, and I learned from the Rebbe, and I see how the Rebbe, didn't incorporate this attitude into Yiddishkeit. Another example, in 1951, after the Hasidim chose the Rebbe to be our Rebbe, so the Gabbai, Rabbi Yochanan Gordon, that's Josh Gordon, who everyone listens to on Chabad.org of Chitas, his grandfather was Rabbi Yochanan Gordon. So he was the Gabbai in 770. So he called out for the first time, Yahamoid, Adinenu, Meirenu, V'Rabbeinu, our master, our teacher, and the Rebbe's name. And the older brother-in-law wasn't given that title. So he was afraid that the old Rebbetzin, the Rebbetzin Chamedim, in other words, the previous Rebbe's wife, will have a kpeda on him. So he asked the Rebbe about it, and the Rebbe said, a kpeda of an old lady, it doesn't do anything. In other words, in a sense, it's like a wives' tale. The Rebbe had great respect for his mother-in-law, but don't get carried away. So today, this Farbrengen, I'm talking about this important nekuda that the Rebbe brought to the Chabad world, and that is to live and let live, and to go on, and not to harbor on it's mine, it's yours, this silly, narrow, small-minded type of thinking. And my advice to everyone here is, if you encounter that, run 100 miles away. Run away from it. Don't be part of it. It's a pure waste of energy and time. Just run away from it, because it's no good. Because as soon as you get involved and you take this side or that side, whether this, it's a mess. Okay? Now that doesn't mean, let's say, Isser Chaim Zev spoke about the shul, they have a mishkafayim, with the time, and then, I'm not talking about that, but it's like, hey, this is what we're doing. You want to join us, fine. You don't want to join us, but not, the other place is doing this, the other place is doing that. By us here in Borough Park, Isser, our Gabbai and a member who was on the wealthier side, they decided to, they wanted certain things in the shul that the new younger light, the new young marrieds didn't want. For example, they wanted the coffee room to be open after 9:30, after we started Shachris. Yeah, because they would come sometimes late and they wanted coffee. The Gabbai, and they said, no, 9:30 it closes, we start Shachris, no coffee. Now that's silly, but it's not silly, because it created division, it created strife. And such things, ultimately the Gabbai and this person created their own shul. And at the time, people were very upset, myself included. And then, we as we were talking about it, one of the other people said, just leave it. There's room for 2 shuls, and there's room for 2 Farbrengens. And guess what? That's the way it's now. 3-4 years later, they have their speakers, they have their rabbis, they have their Farbrengens, and our shul is 4 times the size. And we have our things, and God bless everyone, The 2 Satmar, 2 brothers, right? Reb Zalman Leib and Reb Aaron Teitelbaum. In the beginning, it was a war. You can't imagine the fights and the hatred. Years went by. They come together. They sit together. Just recently, they sold their father's possessions in a way that they both agreed upon. each one has 10, 20,000 Hasidim, each one has buildings. So the Rebbe, from the beginning of his leadership, didn't allow for this, narrow type of thinking. It's mine, it's yours, and things like that. The only reason that he made a big issue of the library is because, and he wanted, for 35 years, he said it was quiet, it was where it was, and no one touched it, and no one made a big issue. Then when someone went, the grandson of the previous Rebbe, to sell books, to profit, and sell part of the Holy Library of Chabad Lubavitch, the Rebbe said he's starting up with the Rabbeim, and this we as Hasidim have to protest. So it wasn't, it's mine, it's not mine, it belongs to Hasidim. The Rebbe never said it's his. Just a few points before we finish. It's important for everyone to write a pidyon nefesh upon a petition note for Gimel Tammuz. And today, through the fax or WhatsApp text, you can send it in on the day of Gimel Tammuz, on Thursday. And maybe some people in your communities that are going to New York. I don't know if they've gone already, they might be going. Rabbis, the Shluchim, and others, Balabatim. So it's always good to send that in and to give some tzedakah associated with the Rebbe's institutions. And it says clearly in the letter that he wrote for his father-in-law, Yud Shvat, that you should gather your family and tell them about the previous Rebbe, tell them about his Avos Yisrael, his love for every Jew. So the same applies here. And of course, you should light a candle for the Rebbe's neshama. That's the tradition. And if someone is moved to say Kaddish, then let him say Kaddish. If you're moved, if you have that feeling, there's no sin to say Kaddish. If you move to say Kaddish for the Rebbe, because the Rebbe left over no children, physical children. And to attend the Farbrengen, I'm sure there are many Farbrengens for Gimel Tammuz, to attend the Farbrengen, to say L'chaim if you can, even if you can't on alcohol, to say it on water, and to make Achlata Tova a good resolution on some practical thing, not theoretical, practical thing associated with the Rebbe's either teachings or his institutions, or his projects. So if someone wants to say, I want to commit to going to put on tefillin with Jews once a week at lunchtime or whatever, that's my resolution for an hour or so. That's a very practical thing. If someone wants to go around making sure people have mezuzahs and kosher mezuzahs, that's another one of the 10 campaigns, Mivtzoyim of the Rebbe. And if someone wants to start learning Likutei Sichos or his Maimorim, that's another resolution. If someone wants to give tzedakah specifically to his institutions. So all these things are bottom line oriented, because one thing I could tell you is the Rebbe was always bottom line. With all of his Torah genius and his thousands of hours of teaching Torah to Klal Yisrael, there was always what he called the bechein, the bottom line. If there's no bechein, it's theoretical, and it's really, at the end of the day, a waste of time. Okay? It needs to lead to a bechein. The deepest part of Torah needs to lead to a bechein. Anything any of you want to say about Gimel Tammuz?
Tomorrow, in the Chabad, do they do Tachnun?
Yes, we do Tachnun on the yard side of a tzaddik. Yes.
So one second, but there's once a year, one time they don't, right? Which one is that? There's
not once a year, twice a year technically. Yutes Kislev, 3 times a year. Yud Kislev, the Geula of the Mittler Rebbe. Yutes Kislev, the Geula of the Alter Rebbe, and Yud Beis Tammuz, the Geula of the previous Rebbe from imprisonment, etc., from death, imprisonment. So 3 times a year. But on our yard side, Chabad's custom is. But many times there's a chassan or this or that, and by the Rebbe, Rabbi Groner had to place a chassan near the chazan's stand, so because when they were about to say Tachnun and the chazan would begin with Yizgadol Yizkadosh Meirabba, the Rebbe would turn his head like, what, are you trying to pull a fast one on me? Like, he was very particular, and Groner would point that there's a chassan, so then, of course, you're potter from Tachton. But Minute Chabad, and by the way, in Skver, it's the same thing. Chernobyl, they say Kaddish. I think only on their Rebbe's yahrzeit of Beis Nissen, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef Twersky's yahrzeit, they don't say Kaddish, but on their predecessors before, they do say Kaddish. Anything else anyone would like to say or ask? Yeah.
Sorry, just in our community not tomorrow, but Thursday, we're having a Lamech Sefer Torah at our Chabad house.
Oh, beautiful! But that's in the evening, I imagine, right?
Well, it starts at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, whatever time it starts. So there'll still be Kislev. I mean, still be
Gimel Tammuz.
Gimel Tammuz. Sorry.
Who's donating the Torah? A particular family?
Yes, the Pacinos and Pinchneys.
Oh, very nice. So I'll be there in thought. Mokim Shemashafter Shalodam. I listened, the Baal Shem Tov says, the place where your mind is, that's where you are. It's very nice, but you should have mazel and bracha. It should bring such brachas into your community, into your life, into your family. Only simchas, the Eira Torah. Anyone else wanted to say anything?
What community is that? Your
Mishkafayim. Yeah. Anyway, Yaini and Moshe and Velvel tomorrow and Thursday. I'm traveling to Farbrengen in Florida, so there's no shear. You could follow the Farbrengen if you're up in the middle of the night. I'm going to Aventura. It's a Spanish.
Try to send the link.
Okay, I'll send the link on the group, and if not, it'll be on YouTube in a day or so. So then
what about Thursday?
I might be able, might not, because depends. I have to get to the airport. Depends on many things. So that's why I'm Farbrengen today for Gimel Tammuz, and we'll recontinue Monday next week. Monday next week we'll recontinue learning Daf B'Tzesecha. Have a great Gimel Tammuz. Hashem Shebenchas, Mashiach should come. The Rebbe's Neshama should come back with Klal Yisrael, Tchias HaMesim, Mashiach now. Love you all. Bye bye. Zay Gezin. Take care. Bye bye.